For those of you deciding to work with Photopea to create your color scheme page, you're going to have your Google Drive open. Go to your assignment files and open up your color wheel page so we can use this as a reference to looking at the hex codes for the different colors on the color wheel. Because we are going to apply the different colors depending on what color scheme you're going to work with. So what I did here, I opened it in a new window so it wouldn't close constantly, and it'll be in a new tab. Next, you're going to open from computer. So this is after you have downloaded the document that I had you access through Canvas. So this document has all of the guidelines that you need to use. So from here, what you're going to do is follow along the instructions that I have set up for you. So you have a particular place to put the text, the color wheel key, and the definitions and the different colors that pertain to that color scheme. So first thing, we're clicking on the T for the type tool, create your text box at the top. So here we are going to create our title. And I'm going to go ahead and make the font a little bit larger. And if you decide you want to change the size of the font, you can always do that after you've typed it in. You can also change the font style. So if you want it to be bold, it's usually a good idea to make things bold when you are creating a title, because that's what you want to stand out. And then underneath this, we'll go ahead and type in the definition of color schemes. So it's an arrangement or combination of colors. So I'm looking at this, and I think I want the definition to be a different font, not as bold. I do want my title to be a lot larger, so I'm going to increase the size of that. And now I'm going to go to File and Open, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my color scheme or color wheel image that I downloaded from Canvas, and this is going to be our key. So you're going to select the rectangle select tool, and you're going to select this entire area. We're going to do a Control C, Control V, Control C only, and then you're going to go back and you're going to do Control V to paste it. We do need to resize this, so you're going to go up to Edit and do Free Transform, and then you're going to click and drag and hold Shift as you drag to keep it in proportion, and we're going to make it about close to 1.5, maybe a little more than 1.5 inches. Because what we want to do is make sure it fits in the space, but make sure there's enough space for our colors that we're going to add in, as well as room for the definition. So I'm trying to get as close to 1.5 as I can. I mean, if it's not exact, no big deal. What we're going to do with this color wheel key, we are going to repeat this for each section of the color schemes that we're going to put together. So make sure to click check, so we check mark that transformation. But like I said, we're going to go ahead and duplicate that. So this layer, I'm going to go ahead and hold down Control J, and then I'm going to click and drag. So make sure that you change to the Move tool. I'm going to click and drag it to the next section. Control J once again. Click and drag to the next section, Control J, go to the next column, Control J once again, directly underneath that, Control J again, directly underneath that. Okay, so this is going to be our key to understanding how the different color schemes are going to work. So now I'm going to go ahead and label each of these different layers that I have. So it's just more for organization purposes. So double click on layer 1 here, and for the first one we're going to type in complementary. Double click the one above that. This one is going to be analogous. Double click above. The next one is triadic. Moving on to split complementary. The next one is tetradic. And finally, we have monochromatic. Okay, so I'm going to go back and click on my complementary layer. I'm going to click the type tool. I'm going to make another text box. So in this text box, I'm going to put the title of the color scheme as well as its definition. So I'm just going to check my alignment. I want to keep it to the left. I'm going to shrink the font size, actually increase the font size a little bit. I'm going to keep my fonts pretty consistent, so I'm going to go back to the last font that I chose for the definition of color schemes. And for the title of the color scheme, I'm going to make that bold. So complementary, I want to make sure that is bold. And then the definition, I'm going to make sure it's just regular instead of bold. So I'm going to go back up, choose regular. So the idea with complementary colors, you're working with colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So the next thing I'm going to do, and I want to increase the font a little bit only because it was a little hard to see. So I'm going to change that. But I'm not going to make it too big because I'm going to end up copying and pasting this text box and repeat it for the other color schemes. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to do a Control J. So I have my copy. I'm going to move this copy above the analogous layer. So I'm going to click and drag it above analogous. I'm going to make sure I have my move tool selected. I'm going to click and drag down, bring it right above my next color wheel here. And now I can just go ahead and click on the type tool and change the information there. So this time I'm typing in analogous. So the idea with analogous colors, you're using 3 to 5 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So now I'm going to double click the title here for analogous, make sure that's bold. Now I can go back to my layers panel. I'm going to do a Control J. I'm going to click and drag my copy above triadic. Change to my move tool. Click and drag to the next section, which is right below. Go back to my type tool. Double click my title. Well, actually I ended up selecting the entire thing. So what I'm typing here is triadic. And basically what you're doing is creating a triangular shape inside of the color wheel, but you want to make sure that the two sides of that triangle that you create are the same. So it can be any size triangle in the color wheel, but two sides have to be the same, and obviously three colors will end up being chosen for this color scheme. All right, so we're moving along. Control J to copy this text box. Oh, and I forgot to make sure that my title is bold. Okay, so back to my layer panel, Control J. I'm going to click and drag above the split complementary, go to my move tool, click and drag over to the next column. I'm going to go back to my type tool. I'm going to double click only the word triadic this time just to keep the bold font. Type in split complementary. I'm going to go ahead and highlight my definition to change that. So the idea with split complementary, what you're doing is taking a color and working with two colors that are adjacent to its complement. So once I show you the different colors that you're going to work with for split complementary, it'll make better sense. Okay, go back to the layer panel, Control J to copy, drag it above tetradic, go to my move tool, click and drag to the next section, go back to my type tool. I'm going to highlight the title of this color scheme and change it to tetradic. Okay, so the idea with tetradic, what you are doing inside of the color wheel, you're creating either a square or rectangular shape inside the color wheel. And so this time tetradic is going to work with 4 colors. The thing with obviously the square, all the sides are equal. But if it's a rectangular shape that you're working with inside the color wheel, you want to make sure 2 sides are the same. And then going back to my layers panel, I'm going to do a Control J of that text box, click and drag it above my last color scheme. And I'm going to click and drag it to my last section, go to my type tool, double click the title, change that to monochromatic. I'm going to highlight my definition and change that definition. So this time with monochromatic, you are working only with one color, but you want to make sure you're working with the lightness and darkness of that color, so different values of that color. And then I'll show you a way to be able to choose the lightness and darkness of that color, but staying within that same color to create that monochromatic value. Okay, so now that we have our definitions of each color scheme, we're going to go back to our layers panel. And like I said, the idea with the way we're putting it in the layers panel is organization purposes. So I'm going to click on the complementary text layer. So anything that I create will end up being above that. Okay, so I'm checking the fill. I want to make sure that there's no fill. So I clicked on the rectangular tool. I'm going to keep the stroke on there as black. And we're going to end up filling in the different squares as we go along to each color scheme. So I'm going to create a square that's about 1 inch in height and width. So as close as I can get it, I'll make that 1 inch as I click and drag. I am holding down on Shift as I click and drag, just to make sure that it remains in proportion. So let me try this again. It wasn't working out very well. So if it's not exact, that's no problem, but as close as you can get would be perfectly fine. Okay, so I got my first square. I'm going to go ahead and change to my move tool, and I'm going to scoot it all the way to the bottom right corner of this one section. So once again, reason for the guidelines is so you can make sure your objects are aligned. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a Control J of this shape, and then I'm going to click and drag it right next to it. So for complementary, we're only working with 2 colors. But now, before we start adding colors, I want to go ahead and repeat the squares just to make it easier, so I can just go back to it later on and change the color. So in my layers panel, I'm going to click, make sure one shape is clicked. I'm going to hold down on Shift and click the other shape, and I'm going to do a Control J. So notice it copied both of those shapes. I'm going to click and drag one of them because they're both selected, and I'm going to move that above the analogous text layer. So now I can go ahead and click and drag that down. However, I'm going to make sure that only one of the shapes is selected because I'm going to make a copy of this one here. So do a Control J because now I want to make sure that the analogous has 3 boxes that I'm going to fill in with color. So 3 squares that I'm filling in with color. Now the nice thing is there's 3 more color schemes that are going to use 3 colors. So I can repeat these 3 shapes here. So back to my text, back to my layers panel. I already have 1 square selected, so I can go ahead and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to hold down on Shift and I'm going to click the last shape here. So it selects all 3. So I'm going to do a Control J, and I'm going to click and drag this above the triadic type layer. Now I can click and drag this directly below. Make sure it's lined up. Now since these are already selected, I can do a Control J, click and drag this above the split complementary type layer. So I'm going to go back to this area and I'm going to click and drag it to my split complementary area. Same process, do another Control J, click and drag above the tetradic type layer. Actually not triadic, sorry, tetradic. You're going to do it above the monochromatic because tetradic we're working with 4 colors. And then we'll get back to the tetradic once we get to that section. All right, so we've got most of our page set up here. We'll go ahead and create our tetradic squares. So the squares have to be a little bit smaller just so we could fit 4 of them in there. So the size of this, we'll probably get it either a little bit more than 1/2 inch. So we'll try maybe about 0.6, because 0.5 is a little bit too small. We don't want it to be too small to where we can't see it. So if you noticed, I selected the tetratic layer, making sure that this square is directly above the tetratic type layer here. I'm going to do a Control J of this shape so I can repeat that on there. And then I'm going to hold down on Shift and click the shape right below it, because I just need two more of the same size. So the easiest thing to do is just to copy those two shapes. Hold down on Shift, click, Control J to copy. Now I'm just going to click and drag it directly above. So now I have my four squares together that'll show the tetratic color scheme. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to go back down to our complementary layer, and we're going to choose the square that is closest to the color scheme. So you want to make sure to check the blue outline and see which one is picked. Okay, and it looks like I have an extra shape in there. No, I don't. Okay, so before we add our colors, we're going to work with the pen tool. So click on the pen tool, and what we're going to do here, we're going to create a line that goes from one color to the other. But let me zoom in on it first so you could see it a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so back to clicking my pen tool. So complementary, working with colors that are opposite each other. So any combination will work. So I'm going to click on yellow and then click on violets. And when you do that with the pen tool, it'll create a line going from one to the next. Okay, so this is going to indicate what colors I'm going to use. But if you want to try any other combination, that's perfectly fine. What I'll do after this, I'm going to choose the square that's closest to the color wheel, and I'm going to change the color. But like I said, any colors directly across from each other, we'll go ahead and make a complementary set of colors. So here, making sure I'm working with the square closest, but you can see which one by seeing which one has the blue outline around the square. So I'll work with yellow first. I'm going to look at the hex code for yellow here, and then go back to Photopea. And I want to make sure to select my rectangular shape tool. So notice when I go up to the top, there's no fill. I'll click that. I'm going to click the solid color. I know it's not the correct color, but you want to make sure to double click that. And there's already a yellow there, so let's check and see if it's the same hex code, and it looks like it is. So I can go ahead and click OK. So the next one we have is violet. So I'm going to click on the shape that indicates the square next to it here. And I'm going to go back to my fill. I'm going to click the solid color, and I'm going to go ahead and click on that yellow to change the hex code. So I'm going to check this violet to see if that's the correct one. So that one is, so it's 8080. I'll click OK. So now I have my yellow and violet. Moving on to analogous. So what we have here, 3 to 5 colors next to each other. So the way that we're going to indicate the colors for this one is we're going to go ahead. Notice I'm going to click on my layers panel, the type tool. Now the reason for that is just to make sure that these different shapes and colors that I'm working with stay within that section. So it's more organization purposes. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my, I'm going to change the shape to an ellipse. And I'm going to go ahead and click and drag over 3 colors here. So the colors I'm working with, blue, blue, violet, and violet. Oh, but there's a fill, so I want to make sure to remove that fill. And I kind of don't like the angle that the oval is working with, the ellipse is working with right now. So what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to rotate it. So it's just circling around the colors that I choose. Okay, so I have those 3 chosen. So going back to checking, making sure to accept that transformation. Back to my layers panel. I'm going to look for the square that's closest to my colors. So I'll start with, just check here. Okay, so I picked the square closest to my color wheel. I'm going to start off with the color blue. So I want to make sure that my shape tool is selected. I'm going to go to Fill and click the solid color. Now it looks like there's already a blue there, so what I can do, I can check my hex code in a minute. So click on that, double check. Make sure that it's correct, click OK. And now I'm going to click my next shape, the one directly in the middle, so the one next to the blue square. Go back to my fill, click the solid color, and click the solid color again, and change the hex code. So I got to go up and check what my hex code is for blue violet. I'm going to go ahead and type that in. Click OK, changes it to my blue violet. And finally going to my next shape. And I'm going to click on my fill, back to the solid color. And the solid color is violet, so I already have one there, so I can always just click on that because it saves a few of your colors that you have been using. So the nice thing is you don't always have to type in the hex code for that. Alright, so this is our analogous colors, so colors next to each other. So next I'm going to click on the triadic type layer in my layers panel. For this one, we are going to work with creating a triangle inside of our color wheel. I'm going to click on my pen tool here, and I'm going to create my triangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click above violet, go to green, go to orange, and back to violet. And then notice I forgot to remove the fill, so I'm going to go back up, remove the fill. So my triangle is a little bit crooked, but for the most part you can see that it makes an equilateral triangle. Now it doesn't always have to be an equilateral triangle. As long as 2 sides are the same, you can choose any combination of 3 colors in there and create using a triangle. Okay, so notice the 3 that I chose that are equilateral ended up being the secondary colors. So I'll go ahead and start with my green. I'm going to go back to my layers panel, click on my shape here that's closest to the color wheel. You can see that by my outline. I'm going to go and make sure that my shape tool is selected. So click on the shape tool, and I'm going to go to my fill, click the solid color, click this color here, go back to, oh, it looks like there is a green there. I'm going to go ahead and double check to make sure that the hex code is correct, but it looks like it is. Click OK. And then moving on to the next color for this color scheme. And I'll go clockwise, working with violet. I'll go back to my fill. Click on the green. Looks like my violet is there already, so I'll just go ahead and select that. Click OK. And then choosing my last one here, which is my orange. So go to my fill, click the solid color again. I don't have orange in here, so I'm going to have to fill in the hex code for orange. Click OK. Just double checking to make sure that I filled it in correctly. Oh, it was just taking a while for it to load. So here is my triadic color scheme. So now I'm going to go ahead and move to the right column, and we're going to work with split complementary. So we are working with 3 colors. So it's the color on the 2 colors adjacent to its complement. So I'm going to go ahead and on my layers panel, I'm going to click on the split complementary type tool. Now, the idea with split complementary, it is going to make a triangle as well, but it is pretty specific on how it works. That's why I kept that one separate. Alright, so now I'm going to click on my split complementary type layer in the layers panel, and I'm going to go to my pen tool, and I'm going to create a split complementary triangle here. So the color that I'm going to go ahead and start off with is red, and the opposite of red is green, but instead of working with green, we're going to work with the 2 colors next to green. So I'm going to go with yellow green here, blue green here, and I'm going to close my triangle, but I forgot to remove the fill. Let me close that triangle. So notice, once again, makes a triadic color scheme, but it's very specific on how it works out, because you do want to make sure to work with the 2 colors next to the complement of the first color that you chose. Alright, so going back to my layers panel. So I'm going to go back to my layers panel here, click on the shape closest to the color wheel, and then I'm going to put red in the first square here. So I'll click on my shape tool, go to fill, click on the solid color, and then it looks like there's red there already, so I can click on red. But if I need to double check its hex code, I can go ahead and do that just to make sure that it's the correct hex code. So I'm going to check here. Looks like it is the same hex code. Click OK. Move on to my next shape, which is the middle one. I'll go with yellow green here. So I'm going to go to my fill, click on the solid color, double click on the next solid color, check my hex code for yellow green, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight, type in that code. I'm going to click OK. It's just taking a minute to load. Moving on to my next color here, which is my blue-green. So I'm going to go back to my fill and click on the solid, click on the other solid, check my hex code for blue-green, go back to Photopea, highlight the code here, type that in, click OK. Got to double click the code, make sure it's correct. Click OK, and there's my 3 colors. So the nice thing with this, when you start putting the colors together, you can see how they work next to each other. All right, moving on to tetradic, click on the tetradic type layer in the layers panel. So this one, what we'll try to do, we're going to work with creating a rectangle inside of the color wheel. So notice I chose a rectangle shape tool. I removed the fill, and I'm going to work with, let's go with orange, green, red, and blue. So I'm going to click and drag a rectangle that's pointing to those 4 colors. And notice, just that easy to create that. So once again, when you create a rectangle inside for tetradic, the 2 sides have to be the same. You can also create a square. So for example, if you create a square, and let me see if I can get this right. When you create a square, what you can do is rotate it to where it picks, let's say, yellow, blue, green, violet, and red, orange. But what I'm doing here now is just rotating, just so you could see what 4 colors this rectangle can end up choosing. Yeah, so I want to edit transform to do that. But if you want to keep it the same as mine, that's perfectly fine. So I'm just going to straighten out my rectangle a little bit. Oh, and then what I'm trying to do here is create a square just so you can see when you create a square, what you can do is rotate it just like I did with the rectangle, but trying to get an exact square right now, it's not working out for me. If I started off with a square, it would have been easier. But trying to hold down on shift and making this into an actual square. But I just wanted you to get the idea of how tetradic works out. See, there we go. So pretty close to a square, but notice how you, what ends up happening if you look at it, it ends up, the square skips 2 colors each to get to these 4 different colors if you look at the spacing in between. All right. So you can choose any combination of 4 colors as long as the inside shape you're creating a square or a rectangle that touches 4 colors. All right. So I'm just going to go back and redo my rectangle. And I'm going to go back with my original with the orange, green, red, and blue. So I'll just work in the order that it's pointing to. So I'll start off with orange in the upper left square. So I want to make sure that one is selected. So I'm just double checking to see here. Notice I didn't label the different colors on here. That is extra work, but that works for just really being organized. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill. So same process as before. I'm going to check my orange hex code. Make sure to put that in there. Click OK. Moving on to the next square, which is going to be my green. So double check the hex code. It might be there already. So I'll click on this. There it is. I'll just click on my green. Moving on to, and I'm just double checking to make sure it's the correct hex code. Going on to the bottom left, which is going to be my red. And it should be in there already. So there's my red. I'm going to move down to the bottom right, fill that in with my blue, and my blue is there already, so I can go ahead and put that in there. Kind of starts looking like a Rubik's Cube a little bit. All right, so moving on to our last color scheme, which is monochromatic. So this one, once again, you're only working with one color and the lightness and darkness of this color. So we're going to choose the ellipse tool to just circle the color that you're going to work with. So I'm going to work with violet. So I'm going to, oh, I forgot to remove the fill on that. So make sure to remove the fill. I'm going to go to edit. Actually, no. I'm going to go to my move tool and I'm going to move the circle so you can see that it's circling the color that I choose. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick the middle square first to show the color violet. So I want to make sure that this middle square is chosen. I'm going to go back to my rectangular shape tool, go to my fill, look for my violet. I already have it saved there. So now I'm going to go to the one on the left, the one closest to the color wheel, and I am going to go back when I fill it. I'm going to fill it in with that violet once again, but I'm going to double click here and notice in this area I can click and drag this little tiny circle and move it towards a lighter violet. So this is how you can make a lighter value of that violet by working with that color picker. So we're going to do the same process. The last square is going to be a darker value of that violet. So I want to make sure to click the violet, and then I'm going to go to this solid color here. I'm going to click and drag to a darker violet, but making sure that it's not pure black. I want it to just be dark enough to where I can see a tint, or I should say the shade of violet in there. So this is your monochromatic color scheme. Okay, so we're going to look at this as a whole. Looks like it turned out nice. The only thing I'm going to change is the placement of the tetradic colors. Because the squares are a little bit small, I just want to, I'm going to click and drag. Oh, nope, that didn't work out. Let me try this again. I'm just going to go to my layers panel, select these four. So click on one, hold down on shift, and then I'm going to just move it over just so I have it centered like that. I think that looks a little bit better. And then at this time you can go ahead and if you decide you want to change the font, you can change the font. But I do want to make sure that you add your name to this document. Okay, so you're going to click on the last or the very first layer in the layers panel, click the type tool. In the upper right corner, you're going to make a text box and you're going to add your name in this text box. So I'm going to align this to the right, and I'll just look for a font that looks kind of like a handwritten font, and I'll go ahead and type in my first and last name to show that I created this document. Okay, so just take an overall look at it. Once it looks good, two ways to save. We're going to go to File, Save as PSD. So that's going to download it as a PSD. And then you're going to go to File, and you're going to go to Export as a PNG. So you have two files that you're going to save it as. All of these settings, you just keep it the same. Click OK. So now I'm going to go to my Google Drive. So in my assignments file folder of Module 6, I'm going to click and drag up the PNG. Make sure that it's loaded there. And then going back to Module 6, I'm going to go to my Adobe files. I'm going to click and drag up the PSD. Now the file that you're going to submit in Canvas, however, is going to be the PNG file. Okay, I did specifically set it or restrict it to where it's only accepting the PNG file. So please make sure that you have a copy of the PNG file here, because that is what you're going to submit in Canvas.